Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Success Snap. Now, I'm really bad. I get excited about my guests, so I get really bad about promoting my show. So let me say subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Now, you might be old enough to know that was my Gomer Pyle impression, but if you're not, that's okay. That's okay. It was an old show about a Southern gentleman. So I'll say it one more time. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. So if you want to impress someone with your knowledge of old TV, just say, "Oh, that's my Gomer Pyle impression." Either way, go ahead and subscribe to the show. So let me get on with what this show is actually about. The Success Snap is about success because the definition of success changes for every person. And even if you look at yourself and how your definition of success has changed over time, you see that it has indeed changed. It might be your unique definition, but your unique definition at 18 was different than it was at 25, was different than it was at 35. And on some of the pre-shows, I kind of chronicled my journey to success. But now that we're on the actual shows, every show is someone else, a business person, a creative who is successful or who I think is successful. But do they think they're successful? I don't know. We'll talk about it. So today's guest is actually a friend of mine. And in a previous lifetime, because I've lived several, in a previous lifetime, I lived in LA and I was doing my thing as a screenwriter. And I was in a screenwriting organization and I met a lot of really cool and interesting people. And I need to get back out to LA so I can visit those people. But Rene Rawls was one of them. And she wasn't just a writer like I was. I was like pretty much the only non-hyphenate out there. There were writer directors, writer actresses, writer producers, and then there was me. Well, I'm just a plain old writer. But Rene Rawls was a writer and an animator, illustrator, just really cool people. It really burns my butter because now that I'm in the South, I can say things like, that burns my butter. It burns my butter that we have so many remakes all of the time. And people say, oh, well, there's nothing new in Hollywood. Well, actually, there's a lot new in Hollywood. It's just that your producers don't want to invest in and market a new idea. They'd rather invest in and market something people are already familiar with. So that is, I think, the cross that a lot of creatives bear now that want to do original material. There's not a lot of places for them to thrive in it. But Rene has thrived. And that's why I want to talk to her about her definition of success. So before we do, let me let you know that this episode of the Success Snap is brought to you by Jabo Farms. What is Jabo Farms? Jabo, Jebo Farms, is a farming collective based in Liberia. And the woman that started it is an American. She's married to a Liberian. And they're helping people in Liberia to be independent through farming, through developing their own crops and being able to sell their own crops. So if you're into independence and people really being able to stand on their own, look into Jabo Farms, and you will find a link to it in the description to this show. And the woman that started it is Tracy Dennis Matthews, and she is awesome. So, Jabo Farms, look into it. If you're looking for something to support, I think that would be a worthwhile attribute or a worthwhile group. So, back to talking to Renee. Hey, Renee.
Hey Karen, how are you?
And people don't know, like right now, I'm looking at Renee and I haven't seen Renee in a good 50 pounds.
Wow,
Let's let's just put
Karen.
it that way. Let's just look at it that way. But it's been a while. Because it took me a while to gain this 50 pounds. But
You look good,
that's how
Karen.
long
Good
it
seeing you.
has been. So, Renee, welcome to the Success Snap. When I said, hey, I'm looking for people to interview, you were the first person to get back to me. And people that are listening, I don't know that many people, so I'm not always going to be interviewing friends. But for the first show, I'm glad to see a familiar face. And Renee, I'm really glad that it's you.
Yay, I'm happy too. Thank you.
And Renee, just to know, she has um a cartoon. Is it a cartoon?
Yeah, I think we would use the word cartoon. Some people use animation. Yeah, Sule the Proverb Detective.
Sule the Proverb Detective. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about Sule.
Okay, so I don't know. Do you want the short story or the
Yeah,
long story or the longer story? Which one? We'll
I'll
go with
just
the
take the long story.
okay then.
It's a
Um,
podcast. We got time.
We got time. So when I moved out to LA, I got accepted into a program, Tribeca. They had a program to support writers, to further your career. And let me say in advance, you guys, I'm getting over a cold, so please forgive my voice. But
You
anyways,
you sound sexy. You sound
oh,
very
okay.
sexy. So
Okay,
that
so
it's good. It's working.
okay. All right. So yeah, so Sule the Proverb Detective came out of Tribeca. So I participated in the program and then they said, hey, they're very supportive of their alumni. And they said, hey, you're done with the program, we're coming back to support you. If you write something that speaks to Nelson Mandela's values of forgiveness, reconciliation, and all of his values, we'll give you the money to support it because what Tribeca had done was teamed up with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So prior to that opportunity, I had been in LA walking around a track one morning and I was thinking about my former students. So, going back a little bit more, I used to teach at a high school, Atlanta, Georgia, Frederick Douglass High School. And I was teaching the novel Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And it was full of proverbs. And at first, they were having a few problems, but then after a while, they were just slaying those proverbs. And one of my students yelled, hey, Miss Rawls, we're proverb slayers. Well, walking around the track, thinking about my students, and literally, this 10-year-old boy popped up in my head and he said, hey, I'm a proverb detective. And he demanded to be seen and heard. So I said, okay, little boy, I'll do something with you. So I wrote a picture book. That's what I did initially. I wrote a picture book. And as an artist, as a writer, I put it out there. Nobody was like, no, pass, pass, pass. Looking back, I realized now it wasn't ready, but I had it, didn't forget about it, but tucked it away. That Nelson Mandela Tribeca opportunity came up, and when it said, speak to the values of forgiveness, reconciliation, all of that, I thought about that little boy that was stuck in my drawer, and I said, hey, I'm going to pull him out. And that's what I did. I pulled him out. I had a writing session where I remember in LA, it was August, it was hot. I wrote the script in like 3 or 4 days, sent it off, and we got the opportunity to make Sule into an animated short film. And so that's how it started. Now, just to go back to what you said about being hyphenated, I wish I could have that hyphenation of illustrator and animator. But what I did was I hired a creative team, and that's their specialty and their strengths, and they supported me for that film. So Sule is an animated short film. And people said, "Oh, we want more, we want more." So it took a while, but I did a Kickstarter, and now it's a book, an activity book, and I'm shopping it as an animated TV series. So just so those of you who don't know Sule, I don't know if I said this, I don't think I have, but Sule is a 10-year-old boy who helps kids understand the meaning of your common everyday proverbs. So I don't know if you remember when you were growing up, grandma may have said, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Haste makes waste. Those types of proverbs. Well, the continent of Africa and other countries are full of proverbs, and proverbs they really help with character education, critical thinking, and that has become almost like my mission. And I'm going to take it a little step further, and then I'll let you jump in there. Once Sule was done, now this is what took me on a mission I didn't quite know was coming. Parents of black boys in particular were like, "We want more, we need more." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Okay." And I found out that there were very few, if any, shows featuring black boys in the preschool space. All right. Now I think by that time Little Bill was no longer on TV, but it was a desert for them. Black girls, yes, but black boys in preschool, no. And so I started doing a little bit of homework, and I discovered two things. One, 0 and 5. Parents, any parents out there, I want you to listen carefully. Between 0 and 5, you have those years. Those are the years where kids get pretty much everything they need that will determine future success. That's number one. The other thing I found out too, the more, the closer, or when kids identify very closely with a character, learning increases. So, knowing those two things, I understood why parents of black boys in the preschool space were demanding more, because they need characters in preschool that their sons can identify with. They're the sidekicks, that's great. There may be one or two shows out there now. I don't think so. Maybe one or two though, that featuring black boys. I don't know. But my point is, we need more. Because if those are the critical years, and if they identify with the character and learning increases, we need that for our boys. So that became my mission, trying to
You
create
know, it's so interesting that you say that because I remember growing up, and I grew up in the 70s. Don't say anything about how old I am. Do not say anything about how old I am.
you gotta say
Um,
it.
I grew up in the 70s, and it was the era of baby this and that and baby that away and all these
Mm-hmm.
dolls. And I could never get one that looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
They all
Mm-hmm.
had pretty blonde hair and blue eyes. And
Mm-hmm.
so people that look like me, people that are Hispanic, people that are South Asian, we want to see ourselves represented.
Mm-hmm.
And that representation makes a difference. And I'll never forget, my mom got me this doll, and it was I don't know where she got it from, but she had on this beautiful yellow ball gown, like dress. And she was so pretty, and she had these big pretty brown eyes, and she looked like me.
Oh,
And it meant so much. I mean, you can tell the way I'm talking about it now, the way I'm
yeah,
remembering it, it
yeah,
makes a difference when
yeah,
you see something that looks like you, because in the back of your mind, when you don't, you think that you don't matter as much.
right, right.
And no child should grow up thinking that.
Exactly, exactly. And things have like the space I'm in now, because I'm in that space a little bit, well, a lot. And the dolls are there, thank God, they're out there now. And for girls, there are a lot of, like, yeah, Dot McStuffins. Oh, I cannot think of. Oh, there's a Kyla, I think it is. It's on preschool, Disney Junior. But Their shows featuring black girls are out there. We've fallen a little short with the little boys. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I can
yeah,
see that. Now,
yeah, we
you
need it.
started off as a teacher.
I did, yeah.
So, when you were teaching, what did you think would be a successful teaching career?
Well, I equated that to students. And I think I was a pretty successful teacher because I still keep in touch with some of my former students and they're doing really well. Like I'm really proud of them. You see them doing good things and they come out like one came out here and really proud. Their daughter graduated this year and another one, yeah, she's doing great things and her daughter and I think teaching I equate to the kids and just seeing them launch and being really proud of them. I never honestly saw myself, as some people get into education and they see themselves climbing the ranks and becoming that vice principal and that principal and maybe even going on to higher level, being
Hmm.
superintendent or, in those positions. But that was never my vision. Never my vision, no.
So,
So,
what made you leave teaching and go out to LA?
well, to be honest, going back a little bit when I was in school, I was initially a mass media major, and that's what they would call communications, you know. And so my goal was to be in entertainment, some kind of way. I just didn't know what. But a phone call asking me, "What are you going to do with that?" And that call didn't mean any harm. It was just like, "What you going to do with that?" That was a question, but in my mind, instead of answering, "Oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this," I was like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't do this." That's how I filtered the question in my 18, 19-year-old mind. So I switched my major from mass media to English, talked about going to law school because then I was going to be an entertainment lawyer. And yeah, I took that LSAT, that squashed that one. And the scores were like, no, this is not for you. So I graduated. I had to do something. So I became a teacher. And so I started in middle school and I did that. And for 3 years, I taught. But all the while, I was trying to go back to grad school to get that degree in communications that I always wanted to to pursue that dream in entertainment. So I worked and I took that GRE and it took me like 3 times, but I got the score I needed and I went off to grad school. Went to grad school, finished grad school, taught some more, was still writing, applied to a fellowship program. The first year I didn't get in. I wasn't gonna apply again, but I got a call from some friends in California. It's like, if you don't send that script in and apply, I did. When it was time for the interview, that second time, the first time I did a phone interview, that second time I flew out to LA and I got in. And so that was my transition from teaching to writing. But what I've discovered, Karen, is that I'm still a teacher and that my classroom, I use writing as my classroom. So I
That's
reach my,
that is so interesting. It's funny that you used to want to be a lawyer too,
yeah.
because my degree is in journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a journalist so that I could get into law school. But the problem was, I took several law courses.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to the LSAT. I took several law courses and realized that all the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer was tantamount to grandstanding, and that I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't really be there in front of people going, "You're out of order! You're out of order!
Yeah.
This whole process is out of
Yeah.
order," which
Yeah.
is really, really what I wanted to do.
Oh
So
wow.
I ended up in journalism for a few years at the bottom of the barrel in radio. And there, I looked at how much it was going to take to kind of move up through the ranks and to get into TV and
Mm-hmm.
to live in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, I need to do something else. And so I ended up in corporate training and instructional design. So I get that I'm being a teacher in a way. So
Yeah.
that is interesting. But when you got to California,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in California have big dreams too,
Mm-hmm.
as far as writing, as far as what they're going to do. Did you have any of those high hopes for yourself when you got to California?
Absolutely. It's like, Mama, I made it, you know? So yeah, yeah, it was but I mean, I'm gonna tell you while I was in it, what I was thinking and looking back. Two perspectives. So while I was in it, um, it was, yeah, I thought it was gonna happen sooner than later, you know? I thought it was just a matter of time. So it feels like for me, you're always chasing the carrot, and the carrot is always moving. And then
Right.
you look up, and the years are gone, have ticked by. You know, um, yeah, it's still that dream. It's challenging. It's still
Now,
challenging. Go ahead.
Now, was there ever a time when I know there's been this time in my life because I really wanted to be married and have a child, and when that didn't happen,
Hmm.
I kind of felt like a failure, like I've let myself down. Did
Hmm.
you ever feel like have that feeling, that negative feeling that this isn't where I want to be, this isn't what I wanted to do?
Yes, and I said I've sacrificed, and it got to a point, and that was a low point, where I was like, I've sacrificed all of this, and for what? You know, here I am, and I have nothing to show for all of my hard work and all of my sacrifice. I did get to that point, maybe about 5 years ago,
How
and
did you get out of it?
a couple of ways. I had to go through it. I had to process through those times. I kept writing. Something inside of me won't let me stop. I don't know if it's the stubbornness or what. Like in terms of the industry, I guess I'm like Jennifer Holliday and Hudson. You're gonna love me. I just, you know, you're just going. You're gonna love me no matter what. So, but yeah, I kept writing. People. Oh, I have a good team around me. I have a good team around me. People who support me, tell me, no, what are you doing? Snap out of it. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to, we're not doing this, so get it together. Those people. And so I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for that. Um, but it's been tough. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. It has been tough. And even today, it's still tough. It's a gig where um, it's like you're high, 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 and you have money and it's flowing and all is going well, and then you get nothing, and then
Right.
it's like, okay, this bill is coming up. When is it due? But I tell you what has happened through this whole process, Karen, which has been so good for me, and I had to find meaning in all of this. And the meaning I found it is that it had truly, truly built my faith. And things I used to worry about and be like, oh Lord, how I'm gonna do this and do that. Now I'm just like, you know what? I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm gonna do what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not gonna sit here and lose sleep over it. That's what I'm not gonna do. He's the amen corner. Don't worry about that. He's just saying amen.
I don't know what Benji is saying, but I want to say something to you about writing
Mhm.
because my dark time when I didn't have everything I wanted, it got really dark.
Yeah.
And I tried to take my own life.
Mhm.
And I ended up in what we inmates affectionately called the nut hut.
Oh wow.
And I was in there and they gave us, for some reason, it was during Thanksgiving week, so there weren't a lot of like therapy sessions going on.
Hmm.
At one point, all we had to do was color.
Oh wow.
And so I asked for a pen, but they don't give you a pen if you're a suicide. All they would give me was that little pencil
Mm.
that they give you when you fill out the lotto cards.
Hmm. The ones
And
like that.
yeah, with a little tiny pencil. But you know
Hmm.
what I did? I wrote.
Ah, there you
All
go.
I could do was write.
There you go.
And I talked to my dad about it because my dad is a former musician, but now
Mm.
he doesn't even play music.
Wow.
He has no identification with music at all. But I told him it was there in that place that I realized that I am a writer.
That's
It's
it.
inside of me and I have to get it out.
That's it.
Whether it's writing a blog post, whether it's writing in my journal, whether it's writing a screenplay, I have to write.
Right. And
It's part of who I am. And so when you
mhm,
said you wrote your way out of that feeling, I understood that completely because you're in touch with who you are.
right. Right. I'm not at a point where my lack of, and just to, I'm going to put this in air quotes, success in maybe someone else's eyes. I'm not going to let that validate my ability to write, if that makes sense. Like, I'm a writer and I'm a good writer, you know? And I I'm a very good writer. Let me say it like that. And just because somebody has not recognized it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like if they talk about a tree, just because you don't see the tree in the forest doesn't mean it's still a tree. You may
And it's
not
still
see it,
there.
and it's still there. So that's how I am. So I just kept writing, and the more you write, the better you get. And I I can't say too much about it, but I've recently been hired for my first, and when I say recently, let's talk about pre-strike. For my first TV show, I was hired to write. So that's a good feeling. But by the time it came, I was ready. And I think I said to people, they're like, about time. Don't you think it's about time? So I'm really happy.
Oh, well, congratulations, because that is
Thank
a
you.
big deal.
Yeah.
With everything you've been through, the
Mm.
ups and downs, changing careers, and everything, what advice would you leave people with when it comes to seeing themselves as a success, defining success?
You have to don't look at the big picture anymore, meaning, of course, I want, I mean, you can still have it, but but the house and all of that other stuff, and I guess the husband and the kids, if whatever your definition is. Mine was to and is to sustain myself financially as a writer. But I have learned to celebrate and party and find success in the steps along the way. And I am so grateful I had that revelation pretty early. Like, I heard someone say, I'm not, person's living out here and like, I'm not going back home until I'm success. So, and I don't know what, I think his definition of success was, on that grand scale, probably taking
Right.
home an Oscar. And I kind of looked, and I think at that moment, I'm like, I'm not doing that, you know? And so I made sure I went home, spent time with family, spent time with friends. And when good things came along, like the Tribeca, I celebrated the book. I celebrated finish a script. I celebrated got good notes, honey. I'm celebrating. You just find ways to celebrate and pat yourself on the back, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And for me, it's just looking around at what I do have,
instead of what you
because
don't.
they call it the missing tile syndrome. And
Mm-hmm.
you could be looking at a wonderful, beautiful mosaic, but if
Yeah,
you notice that one tile is missing,
that's
all of a
it.
sudden you don't see the beauty. You just see that there's one
One
tile
tile
missing.
missing. Mm-hmm.
And so, looking at the fact that I love my house, it's decorated the way I want it to be.
Oh,
You know, I have a house, I have a car that I love, my little red Mazda. I go
there you
zoom,
go.
zoom in my car all the time.
That's right.
I love my dog, you know. And so, when I look at the fact that I have good friends, I have good friends across this country.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things matter and they make a difference. And when I was in the Nut Hut, I realized that I had success. I had a certain level of success. It might not have been that narrow definition that I looked at before, but
Mm-hmm.
I had success. And
That's
so
it.
I agree with you. Celebrate what you have, celebrate the moments that go well, and don't poo poo that because it's not this big thing that you want to have.
That's right. And I'm going to tell you this as well. Um, I am going to give you a scenario, then I'm going to tell you what I learned from it. I went to a screening of Hair Love. You remember that movie, the short film that won the Oscar? I
Mhm.
think it was by him. And so by Matthew Cherry, I think that's his name. But I think people, your viewers will probably be familiar with it. If it's not, you can Google it and you'll see. But I was at a screening and he was there and somebody had pointed out his manager. All right. And at the time, I still am, but at the time I was looking for a manager. And Karyn, she may have been about 10 feet away, very close, very accessible. She was talking with someone. And I was like, oh my God, I need to go approach her, right? That's what I was saying to myself. But I let the negative thoughts creep in. And because in Hollywood you receive so much rejection, I was so afraid of being rejected, of her saying no. And I didn't want to hear that. And I allowed that story, she's going to reject me, to take over. And I didn't approach her. And looking back, what I've learned from that is we're always telling ourselves stories, Karyn. And I always tell people, make it a good one. Make it a good one. Because if I had just told myself a good story like, girl, Renee, she waiting on you to approach her and say, hey, lady, I got this script that I know you gonna love. She has a slot on her roster that says Renee, and she's waiting on you to come up and say, hey. If I had told myself that story, I would have gone up to her and be like, hey, my name is so and so, because it would have shifted my mindset and would have given me the confidence. And so no matter what she said, I'd have been like, hey, I did it. But I didn't. I told myself that rejection story. So I try to tell people all the time, watch the stories you are telling yourself. And if it's a bad story, switch the narrative and tell yourself a good story. So, yeah.
That is perfect, Renee. I loved having you on my show as my first
Yay.
guest. Yay! So, if you're listening, and you should be, because Renee had a lot of nuggets of information, little gold nuggets she just dropped along the way. Come back next week. And what did I say at the beginning in the Gomer Pyle voice? Subscribe,
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 subscribe.
subscribe.
And if you subscribe, I'm putting the names of everybody that subscribes into a hat. And not one, not two, but three of you will get a $25 Amazon gift card.
Well, I'm
So go ahead and
subscribing.
subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe. Renee, share it with your friends. And with that, I will end the show and I will be back with you next week. Thank you.